Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Why Book Club chat to discuss this book. I nearly said what I think of it book. I'm going to not impose my judgment before we even start. Yay! Thanks for holding up as well. So this is the book that the Why Book Club were reading in June. I had to check the calendar then. I've got no idea what month it is even. It shows the kind of week I'm having. So lovely Gem and Shannon have come on to chat about it with me. Molly was going to join us, but unfortunately she's not able to, but I'm sure we can have a fantastic chat, the three of us. So I'm going to ask some questions in the comments. If you want to answer along as we go, that'd be great, and tell us what you think of the book. So let's start with an easy one. Do you two want to just introduce yourselves and say a little bit about your channels? And then I've got a couple of things to say before we get started properly. So Shannon, do you want to start? Can you tell us a little bit about where people can find you and about what your channel is about?
Of course. My name's Shannon. Hi. I can be found on YouTube at Head in the Books. I have an Instagram that is, Books Are Lush, also over on TikTok. Getting all flustered here, remembering usernames.
It's so hard.
It is indeed. I typically read fantasy, romance, and thrillers. I've been trying to branch out with a little bit of horror recently.
Yay.
So YA horror was like the perfect pick for this month. I tend to have way more hobbies than I have time for. And yeah, I have a little dog named Coco that's a little Shih Tzu as well. So.
Oh, that's so relatable. Too many hobbies, too little time. Anytime anybody says a hobby, I want to do it. And then I'm like, oh, I don't have time. Knitting, yes, I want to do that. No time. Crocheting, yep. Yeah, I get that. Oh, thank you for that. How about you, Gem? Do you want to introduce where people can find you and what you're about as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Gemma. I am GemInWonderland on TikTok and Gemma's Bookish Life on Instagram, just to confuse you, having two different usernames. Never make it easy. It's quite similar to Shannon. I mainly read fantasy and romance as well. I love the YA genre though. Anything within YA I'll pick up. Definitely been reading a lot of it recently, and quite similarly, I've been definitely starting to branch out to horror because, as far as I'm concerned now, it's July and spooky season is approaching.
Yeah.
So it's time.
Halloween already.
Honestly, as soon as it gets halfway through the year, I'm like, yes, okay, we're getting there now. But any sunny day, I'm just like, oh, it feels like summer. Why can we not? There's those like, is it Another Glorious Morning makes me sick from Hocus Pocus? That's how I feel all the time. So this one's a little bit outside genre for you. It's interesting because it's completely inside genre for me. So we can have a good chat about that. I read it. I was trying to remember when I got sent it. So it came out January 2021, and I think I got sent an early copy maybe like the summer before to read it, and it was an ebook. It was like really badly formatted because I didn't know how to send it to my Kindle at the time, so it was all over the page. It could have been a bad experience, but I just really loved it, and it was Cynthia's first book, so it was obviously like my introduction to her, along with everybody else. And yes, it was a good experience for me. I'm not going to give too much away because that's the first question, but before we start, Cynthia sent us some lovely signed book plates and bookmarks. There's one for the two of you if you want to drop me your addresses, and 3 people on social media will be picked out. So if you use the Why Book Club 2023 hashtag, you can be in with a chance of winning one of these. And also my lovely husband will pick somebody out in the comments. It will say Amy McCall just to confuse you. It's him speaking on behalf of me. So he'll pick 3 people at random. So 3 commenters can win some of these. So if you are picked, please just drop me a line on one of the social medias. I'm way under my skin, like the two of you. I just like confusing people. I use my blogger handle on most stuff, and then TikTok I started afterwards, and I was an author, so that's Amy McCall author, just because it seemed easy that way. Okay, so let's just check who's here in the comments. Thank you. Sorry, the comments seem to be on a delay, so if I pause awkwardly, it's not your comment, it's me. Thank you. So I mentioned the other day that I'm not doing my usual Thursday stream because I'm going on holiday for a few days this week. So I will be doing a reading sprint on Tuesday at 7:30 UK time if anybody wants to join us. Hello. Thank you for joining us. Hi, Sharon. Hi, Andreas. Yes. Okay, so that's a good start. So Sharon's led us nicely into the first question. I want to know what you two thought of it. So I've already alluded to the fact that I really enjoyed it, but it is my usual genre, so I'm interested how this worked for somebody who isn't a big horror thriller reader. So how about you, Shannon? Do you want to start us off? So whether you enjoyed it, and if you rate it, what did you rate it? And people in the comments can let us know as well.
Okay. So I did enjoy the book. I thought that it was fun, it was fast paced, it slammed right into the action straight away. So there was no like waiting about for anything. The characters were well developed. They seemed very fresh and renewed. I gave it a 3 stars though, because I found it just a little bit predictable, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing, isn't it, with YA and I don't know, books in general. When you read a lot, you start to see patterns, don't you? And I think YA particularly, like there are certain constraints, and I think if it's kind of following a certain pattern, you can sometimes guess. Yeah, I remember the first time I read it, I did guess the final twist. I'm talking like as if people haven't read this. If you haven't read it at this point, we are going to spoil it, so maybe watch this later. But yeah, I think I did predict the final twist, but then some of the stuff as it went along kept me guessing. How about you, Gemma? What were your thoughts about this one?
Yeah, so I really liked it. I actually read all of Cynthia's books in a period of 48 hours in
Wow.
January, which just tells you how addictive her writing is. I started with her most recent release and then worked backwards, weirdly. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really fun twist on a YA thriller by having that supernatural element thrown in there as well, which I thought it was really fun. That added like an extra layer to me, which kind of made it more enjoyable. So I ended up giving it a 4 stars because I really liked the supernatural part, which made it really fun.
Nice. Out of interest, which was your favourite Cynthia Murphy book then out of the 3?
The Midnight Game was definitely my favorite. I absolutely adore it. Yeah, it's so good. That one I gave 5 stars because I just absolutely loved every second.
I'm gonna have
Yeah, I think it's a rare book. I would definitely recommend it. For anybody who doesn't know, it's a group of teens who haven't met each other before. They have been meeting in inverted commas online, and they meet up in real life to summon the Midnight Man, as you do, who is like a creepypasta urban legend. And I won't say whether they managed to summon him, or it's another one of those like, is it supernatural? Is it not? A bit like this one. But yeah, I thought it was really good. And I don't know whether it's just specifically my niche or whether Cynthia's books just get better and better. It could be one of the two, but I really love that one. So Sharon enjoyed this one, said it was a good cozy thriller. Charlie's here. Hello, Charlie. I feel like we need to have Charlie present for every UK YA chat. Sorry, Charlie, but you're just necessary. If for anybody who doesn't know, Charlie has a book box that features UK YA books and talks a lot about UK YA books online everywhere. And she's one of the judges for the YA Book Prize this year, so definitely the authority on YA books. So you mentioned it being supernatural, Gem, as something that you liked. I'm a bit funny with supernatural. Sometimes I really like it. Sometimes I feel like it's an easy way to get around something. It's like, what, there's a mystery, supernatural, that explains it all. I didn't think Cynthia did that. I thought that because the mythology kind of matched up with the way the supernatural element developed, that it felt like a firm footing rather than supernatural just pull the rug out from under me. So what else would you think? Like, is there anything you can add to that, Jem? What did you think about? I know you liked it, but was there anything else about the supernatural that you want to say?
Yeah, so I thought the easy way out as such for this book would have been just to go down the route of like a creepy stalker plan because of her being involved in acting and theatre. That would have been the easy way out. So I thought having this like extra supernatural element where it was someone from the past who's dealing with all of this in the modern day and is obviously picking out girls that look like our main character. I thought that was just such a more interesting way to end it, and it definitely had me guessing a little bit more, which was a lot more fun. I hadn't read a thriller, a YA thriller, or any other thriller like that before, so I just thought it was really fun. And you're absolutely right; it did match up with the mythology and obviously all the work that she'd done in the museum beforehand. So I just thought that was a really good way to do it, and I was very impressed that Cynthia managed to do that in her first book.
Yeah, it's very cool. And I think the fact that it was a Revenant was good. I'd kind of narrowed it down to I thought that it was Tommy. She says, having finished the book like 2 days ago and already forgotten the character names. I'm so bad. So I think early on, I'd kind of, as you start to eliminate people, I was like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna set it. It's him. I think it's him. But I couldn't figure out what he was. I was like, is he a vampire? Is he a something? I didn't get Revenant. I thought that was cool as well, that it felt like a different thing. How about you, Shannon? Are you a fan of the supernatural and do you think it worked in this one?
Yeah, I think it worked really well, especially where it toed the line throughout the whole novel. You weren't quite sure if Neve was really seeing things or feeling things, and like misinformation coming from like all of her surroundings. So the whole way through it, you're like, is it supernatural? Is it just like a crazy stalker, you know? But the supernatural element really held true all the way throughout the book, keeping you on your toes. And I really liked the end scene with Tommy because like it kind of all came to like that big explosive end that like pays off in the long run. So yeah, I really did enjoy that it went the supernatural route instead of just being like, you know, as you said, Gemma, like the crazy stalker fan of someone that's into drama. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
I thought that the ending was really good too. The fact that it felt really high stakes that her sister turned up. I thought that that was a really nice way that the ending just kind of kicked off as soon as her sister was gone. You're like, your heart's pounding kind of, well, she won't she? Especially because Cynthia was kind of, when I read that, it was like, she was a bit of an unknown element. So I was like, is she just going to kill everyone off? Like, I felt really like, oh gosh, how is this going to go? And I think what you said is interesting as well about like trust. I think that Cynthia plays with that in all of her books. Like, who can you trust? Who does somebody on the face of it seem trustworthy? Are they really? I think that that was a good thing about this one. Like, I don't know. Like, let's go on to the characters then. I know you said that you both mentioned a little bit about liking the characters. What did you think of it as a whole cast? Did you like the minor characters, the main characters? Was there anybody that you didn't like that you maybe were expected to like, or any of that? How about you, Gemma? Do you have any strong feelings about the characters?
I just feel like they were all really well rounded. They all had a really interesting backstory. I was happy with whichever character we were focusing on at the time. I think my favorite was probably Tommy, just because it was just so interesting to unwrap the layers as we worked through the book with him. And then obviously him playing such a huge part was so interesting. I thought Neve was a really solid main character who was obviously trying to work things out herself. She wasn't quite sure of herself. And I think that's always something that I really like with the way that Cynthia writes characters. She makes them feel quite real for her audience and the age that her audience are. Like, she's not got everything worked out and she's still sussing things out in her own life. And it's just been thrown into this crazy situation. She doesn't know what she's doing with it. And she's kind of working through it with you, which I always find really good.
Yeah, and I think that Neve as well, like you said, she seems age appropriate, but she also seems like really consistent. I like it when an author can kind of keep you with a character all the way through the book. Like, she seems not to break character at any point. Like, she just is her all the way through the book, and I just kind of accepted this is a person telling me a horrible story. So yeah, I thought that that was really well done too. How about you, Shannon? Were there any characters that you had really strong feelings about either way?
Yeah, I believe Jeffrey was like such a really nice character.
Yeah.
And subtle ways that like he touched and moved the plot forward by telling you about the items in the museum and just kind of being around Tommy and Neve and like I don't know, he was just like a happy chap. So every time he was around Neve, I just felt like she kind of blossomed because he was happy and it took the pressure off of her going through all of this horrible stuff. I I would have liked if Jasmine was a little bit more built up because
Yeah.
we're not meant to like her. Like, she's meant to be a dislikable character anyway. But I would have liked to seen some more interaction because with her and Neve, with their personalities being like polar opposites, I believe it could have pulled out more of Neve's character if they had more like of a dynamic. I do believe the dialogue in this book was beautifully written. Like, the characters come to life through the dialogue, and it could be like they're sitting there like telling you this story and having this conversation with you, which I felt was like just done immaculately. Sorry.
No, that's a really good point. And I think that the like the dialect of the characters as well, I thought was really good. Like, it was kind of touches of it, so it wasn't overwhelming, but like I could tell that Neve was Irish, and then there were people with like little bits of like London like language they used and the way the accent was kind of represented and stuff. I thought, yeah, that was really good. Let's just jump to the comments for a sec. Yeah, I think Cynthia's books are just like you said, Jem, like read it in 3 books in 48 hours, not even 1 book in 48 hours. Like, there's something about her writing style that's very Moorish. And I think I've said before, like, easy writing, it sounds like an insult, like, oh, it was easy, but it's like really hard to do that well and make people keep turning pages. And yeah, I think the historical side was really done. I'm glad you took it as a compliment, Charlie. That was how it was meant. You are needed always. Yeah, I think so too, Andres. Completely agree. Because, like I said, if that's done wrong, I think it can really wrong for me as a reader, and I feel cheated and annoyed. And Cynthia didn't annoy me, so that's good to know. Yeah, it was really good because I think sometimes in a YA book, like I had this problem with Mina when she goes to New Orleans and people start dying, you've kind of got to justify why they don't just run home to their mum, which is what I would do. And like, story's over. Amy ran home on page 5 when the very first person got killed. And that's why I'm not a YA main character. But yeah, I think that it was kind of believable, wasn't it, that she wanted to be home, but also had this really strong pull to be where she was in the moment. So yeah, I wanted to, what we've said a little bit about in the supernatural side of it, we mentioned Spring Hill Jack. He wasn't a figure that I knew much about, and I instantly wanted to go and do a little bit of reading, which I think is always a good sign when something's historical, if it makes you want to dig deeper. Are you a fan of that kind of thing in books? And what did you think of this particular, like the myth that Cynthia chose and how she delivered that? What did you think of it, Shannon?
I really liked it. I think it brought such a eerie element to the story, bringing in like the mythology of not only Jane in like the past, but bringing in like this big dramatized killer that no one's caught. It's kind of like Jack the Ripper in a sense, you know, where the mystery never ends. There's always something coming next. And I felt like having this as a central plot point at the like last act really wanted you, like pushed you to continue reading to see like what is happening with this killer. Like, is he back? Is this a descendant? Because at a certain point I was like, could this be a descendant from,
Yeah, that's a good point.
you know? And then yeah, I just think it really added to the plot and made it just that bit more creepy.
Definitely. I think something grounded in, I know that it's like a legend and it's like, is it real or not? I think it definitely makes me more creeped out. And I don't love the fact that they didn't catch Jack the Ripper, but I'm fascinated with that a story has become just part of our like culture because he didn't get caught. You know, I'm presuming maybe not still alive, but at one point, you know, that person would have been out there, which is terrifying. How about you, Gemma? What did you think of the historical side and it being Spring Hill Jack in particular?
Yeah, I really like the myth that Cynthia picked because, like you, Amy, I didn't know very much about it either, which I thought made it even more interesting because I couldn't use that myth then to guide my thinking on where the story was going, which made it really good. So it was very clear that Cynthia had done her research and she'd done that really well and she'd built that into the plot. And because she'd done her research so well, it was so beautifully threaded throughout the plot. And then all of the pieces just kind of clicked together in that final act, which was really good and really well done. And yeah, like you, Amy, I went and read up on it afterwards on what to learn lots more about it. So yeah, really well done.
Yeah, there were some really memorable details like the hair jewelry, which makes me gip every time I read about it. I was like, well, put the book down for a minute. But then it came back at the end, like these little things that seemed like a throwaway comment that were just there because they were interesting, actually weren't. They were relevant to how the plot would all tie together with a long piece of human hair. But yeah, I thought it was really good too. I enjoyed that. It was one of my favorite things about the book, actually. Hi, Shelley. Thank you for joining us. I know that Shelley's a big fan of this book too. I think we read it at a similar time, like back in the day. So it's nice to chat about how we feel about it now. So, what did you think of the tropes in this book? Because as I was reading it this time around, it struck me that Cynthia uses a lot of the things that I am really interested in. Like she kind of played with the Ouija board thing, the being in a room that you can't escape, and the room's even getting smaller. There's Neve's in it in the library. It kind of ticked off a lot of tropes that I enjoy. And I don't think there were any in there that I went, oh, this isn't a trope I like. But I know that can be the case in a tropey book. So I just wondered what you two thought of that. Were there any tropes that you thought, yes, my favourite, or, oh, no, I don't like that one? How about you, Gemma? Were there any strong trope feelings in this one?
Yeah, so like because I don't read a whole lot of horror, I'm not as familiar as with the tropes in horror books. So I really enjoyed the way that all of these were used. I felt like they were picked out really appropriately for the book. They didn't feel like they were just shoehorned in there for trope's sake, which you can get in quite a few books where they just put them in so that, oh, I know people like this trope. But they were really carefully picked out, and because of that, I think that they all worked really well. And there was none that stood out as anything that I didn't like, which was really nice. There wasn't anything major that popped out to me anyway, but yeah, I really enjoyed that. I always like the Ouija boards in that because I find them fascinating in real life. Not that I'd ever attempt one because I'm too much of a wuss, but I find them really interesting, so I love seeing that in.
I did when I was a teenager. Nothing happened. Spoiler alert. People giggled and there was a very clear pusher of the pointer and that was it. But yeah, I think as an adult now, definitely wouldn't do it. Well, yeah, and I like the fact that in some of them, like the Ouija board scene, it kind of, she flipped it a little bit, that I wasn't sure whether it was real at the time or not. I was like, is she getting any messages, or is this Tommy messing with it, or somebody else? I thought it was good. Like the tropes didn't, because I do read a lot of this kind of thing. A trope can sometimes, if it's just done as it is, it's like, oh, I've seen this before. But I think Cynthia did new things with them too, which is always exciting for me. How about you, Shannon? What did you think of the tropiness of it, if that's a word?
I really enjoyed the Ouija board. Like, I wouldn't use one, so they kind of petrify me just by extension of everything that you see on them is always scary. So I really enjoyed having that trope in there. I enjoyed the like locked room scenario where like you can't get out. I love that trope because like it's just claustrophobic, and the tension that it brings to the story. Like I had full on panic when Neve was in that library. I was like, come on, like we can get out of here, you know? The only trope that I didn't like was poor Will, because Will was a little bit socially awkward and maybe a little bit of a loner, and the way that he was described as like having a bit of acne and maybe not the most charming person in the world, he was like the number one suspect straight away. And I kind of feel bad for that trope because I'm really socially awkward and I can promise you I'm not a killer, you know?
So she says.
So yeah, that's one trope that I'm not really a fan of, but I did appreciate how Cynthia managed to like make Will a part of the story towards the end, where you got like the reasons why the things he'd done seemed a bit weird and strange. There was an answer to everything, which kind of made the trope that I don't like not stand out very much because it was explained so well at the end.
Yeah, I get that. And I think sometimes you start to have a gut reaction to something in a book and then the author kind of turns it around by the end. I think that's a good thing. But yeah, definitely for me, there's certain tropes, like it's children in horror. I can't, particularly, I started reading one where there was a 3-year-old boy and I was just like, nope, hard DNF, because that's mine. You know, I have a 3-year-old boy. So yeah, I think if any trope like hits close to home, it has to be delivered exactly how you want it, doesn't it? Otherwise, you just, like 3-year-old boys can only be happy and fine and healthy in books. Otherwise, I can't cope. So yeah, I totally get that. Let's see, we've got some people in the comments having... Oh, okay, let's see if we can help Andreas with this one. So something doesn't add up for me. Tommy is Spring-Heeled Jack. Why'd they be killing? Any thoughts, you two? I didn't necessarily pick up on that. I'm going to have to think that through for a second. So was he already killing people then? Like that wasn't the trigger? Like was he already...
What if he just picked up the mantle? Like, what if Spring-Heeled Jack was like an actual person that was doing these killings, stopped killing, and then Tommy started doing the same kind of killings, and they just got linked together? So maybe there is a killer out there that never got caught, and it's all just been like moved on to Tommy.
Very possible. That tracks for me. How about you, Gem? Do you have any theories about that?
I'm not going to lie, I didn't even pick up on that. And when I was, maybe I'm just really unobservant, but I didn't even really pick up on that. But I think that's a really cool idea from Shannon, like a copycat kind of idea, just kind of like then just jump on it and just think, oh, well, I can just do exactly what this guy was doing. And then you've ended up in a big muddle.
It would also be a way to hide his crimes as well.
Well, yeah.
If all the legends are pointing to this synonymous killer that no one has really found, then Tommy could really hide what he's doing behind the papers and headlines, you know?
Do you write, Shannon? I feel like there's like a story here, like that you could do something with that. Do you ever, or either, I don't know whether I've asked you this, Jen, before, are either of you into writing?
I am, but it's mostly just a hobby for fun, you know? I enjoy it.
That's how it starts. That's what Mina was. I was like, I'm going to write a book that I really want to write for myself. And then it kind of...
Thank goodness you did, because Mina was amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. I don't know. I think that's what it is, though, that I put stuff in that I'd written other stuff. And until I wrote what I really wanted to write, and it was just a hodgepodge of everything. I don't know. I just got a little feeling then as you were saying that. I was like, oh, can I read this book? So yeah, maybe just bear that in mind. How about you, Gemma? I don't know whether I'm sorry if I've already asked you this. I feel like I may have asked you and I've forgotten, but
No, I'm firmly a reader. If I was going to write a book, I feel like I just end up just rewriting someone else's that I've already read. I can't keep track of what I've read and what is just from my brain. So I will firmly stay in the reader camp and just enjoy all of your wonderful creativity from you wonderful writers out there. Maybe
I totally get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know though. I feel like I sometimes, like the thing I'm working on at the minute, like I read a blurb of somebody else's book a couple of weeks ago and I was like, oh, does that sound like mine? And then I thought, no, actually, one tiny element does not the same book make. And I think that even if every book is like the accumulation of what you've written, what you've experienced, like watched, what's inside you anyway. So I feel like even if you like bits came from other places, I reckon you'd still make your own if you wanted to do that. But I'm not trying to force everybody to write just because I like it. It's like, I think everybody should write because it's my hobby. I hope that we're not spoiling anything for you. But yeah, we are having a spoilery discussion. So if you don't want to hear spoilers, then maybe save this one for later. Yes, it's a good one. I feel like Shelley does tell us a point horror book club. If anybody's interested in reading point horrors, they read one a month and it's really fun. I think that Cynthia, because she is a fan of like the 90s kind of point horror, she picks a lot of the tropes that like were popular in the kind of 90s slashers and stuff. So I think that's why I like them so much, because that's my particular bit. Hi, Stephen. I'm glad you enjoyed the book as well. Yes, I think that we should just like let it be summer, but move straight to the spooky books, please. I'm all for that. Oh, maybe we should we watch it? Should we not watch it? Should we? Is it going to make us never even look at Ouija board again? I'm too much of a wimp, I think, to watch proper horror or read proper horror. I don't know. Yeah, I thought that, Sharon. I think Sharon's probably very into like intense adult horror, so I think that YA horror probably just feels like a gentle rest for Sharon. Yeah, I'm glad that satisfied you. It's annoying, isn't it, when you're reading a book and something's just scratching in your brain, you're like, I can't figure out how this makes sense. Sharon, that's cool. I love that. Everything that Sharon tells me about her life, I'm like, can we write a book about this together, please? Because she's got so many cool stories and things to say. I feel like at some point I need to bring you on, Sharon, and we'll just have a little like autobiographical discussion. I mean, the people are asking for it. I don't know. If anybody ever wants to talk to me about writing and they're just thinking about it, I am all for it. No. Hard, same. Charlie and I, from a selfish point of view, we want to read it. So I feel like people should write it. I don't know. I was talking about this to somebody earlier. When I write, I feel like everything else is just completely quiet. And I'm just, you know how you feel when you're reading a really good book? Like, to me, writing feels even better than that, because I'm just absolutely absorbed in trying to make this thing in my head like come out right. Like, I was writing a scene yesterday and it was terrible and I could feel it was terrible. And I just stopped and went, nope, deleted it and just wrote the scene I actually wanted to write. And then it felt great. It feels like really, 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 I don't know, therapeutic somehow for me. Sharon is a good egg, very creepy, but very good egg. I'm so bad at is that the director or the screenwriter? I'm really bad at who actually made the films. Interesting. I'm going to remember it, but I'm going to blame Andreas if it's too scary for me. So let's see. Oh yes, the plot. We've said about this a little bit. Did the plot keep you guessing? So how much of it did you predict? How much of it was a complete surprise to you? How about you, Gemma? Did it keep you guessing, or was a lot of it, had you figured it out by the end?
I feel like quite a bit of it kept me guessing because of like the little supernatural element. I feel like without that, I probably would have found it a lot more predictable and therefore had the lower rating. But because of that supernatural element, yeah, I was pinning it on people and changing my mind. And I do that with all of Cynthia's books. I change my mind 50 times throughout the time I'm reading it. So I didn't find it too predictable. But then that again could be because I don't read loads of books that are similar. It's primarily Cynthia's books and a handful of other authors that I read. So that might be why.
Yeah, I feel like we need to change that, Gem. I'm sure we're going to do a recommendations question near the end. So if anybody's got any books that feels like we can keep drawing Gem over to the dark side with us, please get thinking of them, people. I've got a few ready on my sleeve. How about you, Shannon? I know that you said that some parts of this were predictable for you. Overall, was it predictable, or were there things that that surprised you?
Unfortunately, it was predictable, but I have this kind of thing where I'm stubborn. So Tommy done something weird for 1 second, and I was like, it's definitely Tommy. Like, and that was it. The whole way through the book, I had set my mind. But the surprise element of him having his mother's spell book and the reasons why he was killing these people, like, even though it was predictable, that cinematic ending scene still surprised me and still made me feel like the whole book was worth that payoff. And the little bits, like the tarot cards going missing from the museum, the lighter going missing, and it was like little bits here and there that just at that end scene, even though I knew it was Tommy, it was still really surprising to see all these little things just come together in one big scene. And you're like, oh, that's where the tarot cards went. That makes sense, you know? And it was really well woven in and then paid off at the end. So yeah, predictable, but very entertaining and very much worth that end scene.
Yeah, I like that. I think that a book can be predictable and I can still enjoy it, even as long as it's like executed really well and there's lots of elements I enjoy. I think overall I predicted the ending, but like you said, I didn't predict all the kind of peripherals, and I definitely didn't get the whole was going to raise her from the dead, like, you know, using her gruesome bones. That was a nice little moment where I went, oh, I didn't know she was going to go there. I'm very glad she did. So that's interesting. Charlie also reads lots of fantasy and doesn't find it predictable. I don't find, I'm just trying to think whether any of them, I think I did predict The Who in this one, but like nothing else. And I'm trying to think in Cynthia's other books. And I think, yeah, occasionally there'll be a bit I get right, but she usually manages to completely throw me off. I don't know. I think I read so many of these kinds of books that quite often I sort of, I don't know, like I have little ways of eliminating people. And yeah, on this one, I did just come up with him. But yeah, mesmerism is an interesting one. Derek, yeah, do you know, when you said that Jeffrey was really lovely, I did wonder at one point, Shannon, whether Jeffrey was so lovely that it was going to circle back and he was evil. And he was using loveliness as like a facade. I was glad that wasn't true. But I sometimes do that in horrors now. I'm like, the nicest person might be the killer just because I've seen that done a few times. Yeah, I can see how Derek was kind of there, wasn't he, to lend a hand? Had he lent a hand, you know, in more ways than we expected? That's actually a good one. I don't know. Is that an acronym? I don't know. Or is that just a typo? I'm sure Charlie will tell us. And I can't click because my mouse is going everywhere. Okay. Let's see. So I'm interested in your thoughts on YA horror. I know that you're not big horror readers, but do you think that there is a point that YA horror shouldn't go past? Or do you think that the YA audience kind of can cope with a lot? I'm just interested in this because it's something that I wrestle with quite a lot. I think my agent, I'm sure I've told this story before, only told me to take one thing out. And it was when I was describing the serial killer Ed Gein. She said that I could leave the fact that he made stuff out of people's skin, but I was just a bit graphic about describing how he did it. So she's like, the how needs to come out, but the fact that he like peeled skin off dead people and made stuff is fine. So I felt like that was quite a helpful kind of distinction for me, like not too much depth, but it could really go there. What do you think, Gemma? Do you think that there's kind of, because thinking on that some of these people reading are 12 or 13, like, or even younger, like I've had people, like parents get in touch and say my 9 or 10-year-old wants to read it, is it okay? And I'm like, you might have to read it yourself first. So yeah, I was just thinking, Gem, what do you think about that, like horror for young people?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one coming from like the perspective of a teacher who has a school library to try and stock and fill with things. A lot of the year 6s in my school at the moment are reading A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson.
Okay.
And like in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, first book, absolutely fine. But by the time you get to book 3, it's definitely a lot more gruesome and crazy, which is then you think, if they're anything like me, I flew through those books and I read them all at once. So I think there's definitely a line where we need to be classifying things as kind of the younger end of YA and the higher end of YA, because there's such a wide age range. You think that kids start reading it at 12, but kids who are 18 are still in that YA genre. So there's such a wide range, and what's appropriate for an 18-year-old maybe not appropriate for a 12-year-old. So I think it's about making sure that those trigger warnings especially are in books these days, which I notice a lot of people are doing a lot more. They're making them a lot more prominent and making sure that they're there, so then parents or the children themselves can read it and decide whether that's for them and whether it's not. Because I've read some YA horror that's quite gruesome, but it's been well done enough where you're right, there's a lot of like that you can have that, okay, that happened in there, but don't go into the detail that you might get in an adult horror.
Yeah, very well explained. And I think as a teacher, it's something that you have to navigate quite a lot. Because yeah, I was there as I was a primary school teacher for quite a lot of years, and I taught like age 9 to 10. So we were having that at the time. It was things like Hunger Games and was it Divergent, or was that a bit later? But yeah, they were definitely like trying to push into the young adult audience and reading like Neil Gaiman and stuff like that. And I was like, some of it's a bit racy. And yeah, Good Girl's Guide, one of my friend's daughters read it, and I straight away went to the scene. I was like, oh gosh, there's a bit where somebody gets drugged, isn't there? And like there's drugs in a drink and stuff. And I was like, I'm not sure about that. But I think that for parents, like my mum let me read Stephen King from a really early age, and I've still got the full shelves behind me to prove it did. I still enjoy it. It didn't put me off, things like that. But we had really open conversations about it. Like I'd say, this is gross. I don't want to read this book anymore. Or I don't understand this. My mum got a lot of really, really, like eye-opening questions from me, like, what does this mean? She's like, oh God. But we had an open dialogue about it. And then I went on to write scary-ish stuff. How about you, Shannon? Do you have any strong thoughts about like what we should put into YA books?
I do believe that there is a line, as you said, Gemma. I do believe we should be distinguishing young adult horror, young adult triggers in a space where it's like, this is for younger readers and this is for older, younger readers. Because like, for example, I'm a huge Court of Thorns and Roses fan, but I would not say that the later books fall into YA or even any. I would say that even the first book would be the older side of YA, but it's in my library at the young adult section. And it's like, yeah, but if they continue the series, like A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, you know what they're getting themselves in for. So like starting something like that at like the start of a series and then it continuing on to be more adult, I can feel like a little bit weird about. I read Clown in a Cornfield and was blown away that that was YA, because it really pushed the envelope more than I was expecting. And I actually had to go on Goodreads and make sure that it was YA before I said anything about it, because I was like, I'm pretty sure this is adult, but it was YA. And I do believe it brings like, kids these days have access to the internet at their fingertips. So like they're probably going to be watching horrors and watching things on TikTok, you know. So I do believe that giving them in book format, it does be managed to open a dialogue for questions. And like you said, Gemma, I really believe in having triggers at the start of a book, because parents and kids can distinguish if it's going to be for them or not. I do think that the spookier side can be fleshed out with like tension and adrenaline and creepy settings, and doesn't have to really go into the gory details. Quite like Mina. Mina is so well set and the world is so creepy and the settings are so like claustrophobic that it doesn't need to go into like the gruesome details to get you scared. So I do believe there is like a line, and the distinction between younger YA and older YA should definitely be made.
Yeah, I completely agree, and thank you. I'm glad that you think that I got it right. It's interesting because I overheard a conversation between a parent and a child who was trying to convince her mom, and she must have been like 11 or 12, that she could read the True Blood books. And I would never interrupt a conversation normally, but I was like, excuse me, that's a really adult book. And I said to her mom, like, talking in code here, there is content of multiple kinds that a child should not be reading. And yeah, so I think that there's a line, like even me as a child, my mum would have been like, nope, not True Blood. So yeah, I think it depends very much on the child. And as a parent, you can make that judgment, like even with a Littly, like I watch his reactions when we're watching stuff on TV. And if it's not right, even Lilo and Stitch at one point, we just watched that and I was like, is this going to upset him? He was fine. So it was okay. We're all good. Stitch is apparently a good subject matter. But yeah, it's definitely a very tricky one. Let's see what the people in the comments think. Yes. I think that to me, that is one of the real bits that I remembered when I reread it. I just pictured that last scene with the bones and stuff. It was really cool. Oh, sorry, the cat was doing typos of Charlie's. That explains it. Yeah, I mean, I did think that like it's very difficult to raise a body, but then I think that maybe because like dead bodies aren't rising up all the time, it kind of probably had to be quite hard. So yeah, I get that, and thank goodness for that as well. Yeah, I mean, I watched it when I was 10 or 11, I think. I'm pretty sure I was in year 6, the original movie version of it, and then in year 7 I read the book, so I must have been like 12. So yeah, I get it, and I think it depends on the kid. And me and my brother were totally different growing up. He was really scared of horror films and still as an adult, not particularly into it. I was just like begging my mum to watch Scream when I was 13, and she eventually let me, and I was fine, and I loved it and watched it 1,000 times. So I think it just depends. Yeah, completely agree, Charlie. And I think that whenever I recommend books, I try and be quite mindful of that, especially if I didn't like something or if it was too much for me. I try and say it was too much for me for these reasons, but I feel like I'd recommend it to Sharon. Maybe if it's way too much for me, it's like, yeah, Sharon, you'll love it. Yeah, it just depends, doesn't it? On like cults don't frighten me, but I've never, that I know of, nobody's tried to indoctrinate me. I think if anybody has got any, like we said earlier, Shannon, like anything that feels personal sometimes can kind of hit a bit deeper with horror. I think grief in children are my like nope areas, because I just know that I can't cope with them on a day-to-day basis as it is. So we've kind of delved into a lot of deep subjects there. Let's kind of go to something a bit easy now and talk about recommendations. So I'm going to start because you two aren't obviously massively into this genre, and I'm hoping I can bring you over to our side. So one that stands out, I'm just looking at I've got a little shelf of some of my favourite horror stuff, just as a reminder. I don't know whether anybody has come across Anna Dressed in Blood by Kendara Blake. I know that she's incredibly popular for her Queen series that she did, which I did enjoy as a not fantasy reader, but I think Kendara does horror so well. And Anna Dressed in Blood is about a boy who is a ghost hunter, and he goes around and like kills ghosts for good type thing until he comes across Anna Dressed in Blood, who has this incredibly creepy and tragic backstory, and they make a connection, and he doesn't, kill her, or does he? Later in the book, you never know. But that's great. It's scary and psychological and very fun and meaty and lots of stuff in it. Catherine Foxfield, if you're into Cynthia's book specifically, is a very good comp to Cynthia's, because she chooses an interesting premise per book like Cynthia does, and then completely makes it her own and does lots of twists on subjects that you know and love. I've just started her new one that comes out next week, Getting Away with Murder, and it's so fun. It's really good. An AI puts a bunch of teenagers, tempts them into this scenario, and it's like The Breakfast Club but with murder. So it traps them, and and it's trying to find out which one of the stereotypes would survive, which I think is very cool.
I was just
so
sent one as well, Amy. Maybe I have to read that one and get.
I think you should, yeah. See if like I said, it does seem. I think it's because Scholastic publish both of them, and I think their horror thrillers tend to be along a similar vein. So if you like those, I think it's worth. I think Scholastic, generally check out Scholastic because they've got lots of good ones. If you like the thriller side, people like Sue Wallman and Gina Blaxill and Tracy Danton's Little Tiger. Yeah, so those two, and then Tracy Danton from Little Tiger also does more the thriller side of it. How about you, Gem? So is there anybody you can recommend, or is Cynthia your main first step into this?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of various different recommendations. So if you really just like Cynthia's writing, especially if you enjoyed not the book that we read this month, but The Midnight Game, this book, Someone Is Watching You, is a really great one. It's about a group of friends who go to an abandoned prison to play a creepypasta game, which is really fun. I really enjoyed this one. I got it in a blind date with the book, and it was a lot of fun. I would really recommend it. It's a really good one. We've got quite a similar writing style to Cynthia, so it's a really fun, put downable one.
Who's that one by? Sorry,
Tess James Mackey.
Awesome. I'm going to add that to my list.
Yeah, it's a really cool one. So yeah, they basically end up in a prison, and then one of the main characters vanishes, and the game has gone wrong.
Yay, that sounds so good.
Yeah, it's very fun. Another, just if you like fast pace, I'm always going to recommend Holly Jackson on the thriller front.
Yeah.
If you, this one, Five Survivors, her newest book, it's so fun. 6 friends trapped in an RV. There's a sniper outside trying to get a secret out of one of them. It's set in real time over 8 hours. So if you liked the TV show 24, very similar setup, which is really fun. Again, I read this in maybe like 2.5 hours because I just could not put the book down at all. And then lastly, if you like the atmospheric supernatural vibes, 16 Souls by Lucy
Yes.
Tal.
Yeah.
It's so fun. It's got the really spooky side of things, a really great atmospheric setting, but a bit more wholesome. So if, like me, you're kind of dabbling into the genre a little bit more, you love the spooky, ghosty kind of things, but you want something a bit more cute and wholesome, would thoroughly recommend this. And the sequel, 12 Bones, comes out in October as well.
Excellent choices. Wholeheartedly agree. I want to read that first one that you said about the prison. I'm going to go back and watch it and write down the title of it. How about you, Shannon? Do you have any recommendations?
I do, but first I just want to nominate Anna Dressed in Blood too, because I read that and absolutely loved. I think it was a duology, wasn't it?
Yes, it's Girl of Nightmares, the second one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much like the spooky supernatural vibes as well. And also the main character kind of reminded me of Dean from Supernatural,
yes.
which just made me fall in love. So
it came out. I asked Kendara about that. I was like, were you inspired? And she said it was like a similar, apparently they came out like similar time and she wasn't aware of it. And so many people said to it, she was like, I'm going to have to watch the Supernatural. And she was like, oh yeah, okay, it's really good. And yeah, I see that too.
Definitely a way to get me to just love a book.
Yes, yeah.
I also have The Dead in the Dark.
I have that somewhere. I need to read that.
So if you want more of like the supernatural vibe, but want it a little bit darker, this goes there. It follows this girl as she follows her dads who are like TV para spectators, and they go to Snakebite because teenage children have been going missing and no one knows where they are, where they're alive. Some have turned up dead, and her and her dad go to investigate this small town. It's also queer, which is always a bonus. So if you're looking for something supernatural and a little bit darker, I highly recommend this one.
Excellent. Yeah, I started reading that and did the stupid thing where I misplaced it, kind of forgot what had happened, refound it again, and when I need to pick this up at some point, and I still haven't. I'm really bad for doing that with books. So yeah, you've made me want. I'm like looking for it on my shelf. I can't see it, but yeah, I need to remember about that one. If anybody's interested in Anna Dressed in Blood, by the way, maybe hold off and not read it, because maybe the YA Book Club might decide to do it, and Kendara Blake may have some goodies for us. So yeah, just a little snippet there of what may be to come. Let's see what for people. Oh, sorry, I've missed Charlie. Catherine Foxfield books are amazing. Yes, definitely recommend. Yeah, I mean, I reread it last year, I think, and then heard that they were doing the rebrand, and they look very beautiful. So I think I'm gonna have to buy those too. And yes, maybe we should all read it together later in the year. Yeah, you've got another vote. And Charlie approves your recommendation.
By Charlie, that means it must be good.
Exactly. Yes, that's a good call, actually. Kat Ellis. I was just thinking as well, Andrina Cordani is another really good one. If you like the thriller side of it, she wrote one called The Girl Who, and one called Dead Lucky, which is about an influencer who is murdered on screen, like doing something like this. And somebody comes into his room and kills him. And then all the other influencers like, oh God, are we next? Oh God, he had all of our secrets and like he's just been killed. So did anybody get our secrets? Yeah, that's a really, really good one. That was Dead Lucky. Yes, it sounds excellent. Yes, Anna Dressed in Blood is awesome. Yeah, I think there's a lot of fans of 16 Souls. Okay, so we have some winners. Kev has spoken. So you lovely people, if you can drop me your addresses and I will send you the goodies. Hooray. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me any of the places. You can also email me on my website if you want to. So these are people who have taken beautiful pictures. I think Sharon's here, and then I'll contact the others. So there's one extra book plate. I would say then, unless Kev jumps in, the next person to comment, if anybody else wants a book plate, you can send me your address and I'll send it to you. Okay, cool. Then I think that is where I wanted to finish the discussion. So before we go, I'm just going to show you this is the book that the Y Book Club is reading this month. Can I just say, look at this cover.
That's pretty.
It's so beautiful. I mean, the girl sunglasses have got reflection of like a fleeing person in it. I just think it's brilliant. It is a Lost Boys retelling. It's girl vampires instead of boy ones, which just makes them better in my book. A brother and sister go to the town of Nightfall and slowly start to realise that the town is run by vampires. It's really cool. So if anybody wants to join us, please do. Suzanne has said that she will send us some goodies. So I'm just in the process of organising that. I think she's going to send book plates for us so people can get their own shiny signed book plate. Yes, I think I might have read that one a second ago. You are very welcome. Yes, that's the email address. If you want to drop any contact details there, I monitor it and my hubby does as well. So one of us will get it. Yes, it is really good. So I read it last October and I've forgotten quite a bit of it because I read it on Kindle. I tend to read stuff like that really fast so I can provide quotes and stuff. So I'm going to try and slow down a bit this time. So thank you so much, you two, for joining me. It's so lovely to have you both on screen. And thank you again for Gemma coming back and doing it all over again. I knew that you would be a good person to chat to, Cynthia's fellow Cynthia Appreciation Society. And it's nice to talk to you in person, Shannon. It's so weird, isn't it? Seeing people, like you see pictures or you see videos of people, but actually being able to interact is really lovely. And so I hope you might want to come back at some point or come onto my sprints that I do on a Thursday. You're more than welcome, the two of you. So thank you everyone for watching. I hope you've enjoyed that discussion. I think I've said everything I need to say and Kev isn't prompting me in the comments, so I must have remembered. Yes, thank you, Kev, for keeping everything in my life and just everything to do my YouTube running smoothly. I wouldn't be doing this without him. So yes, everybody needs one of those. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Gemma and Shannon. We will hopefully catch you at the next Y Book Club. Please reach out if you're reading in Nightfall. I would love to hear it. And hopefully we will see you on the next sprint or chat. So good night, everyone, for now. Bye.